depression, anxiety, and other mental health problems, according to the American Psychological Association. Okay, so I could see that. But my question to you is, have you noticed that this generation and my generation, the young millennials and even younger, they have this like fetish with being toxic? Have you noticed that?
I think honestly, I see your point of view, Izzy, but even my generation, Gen X, can be toxic and is toxic. Boomers are toxic by keeping people limited. It's like, why don't you just go retire? Let the Gen Z, let the millennials, let the Gen X step forward.
Listen, and you know what's funny? We go back to the happy hour segment. The people that I've noticed who are always telling on people are the older ones, and it's just like, just go home. You've literally been in some of these. Some people have, especially in education, some people have been in schools for literally that same school for 40 years. I could never do that. And I would just see, like, how can you be here for 40 years? You've watched literally, it's like Grey's Anatomy. You've watched seasons of people, different cast of people come in throughout the years. And it's just like, and you've been there the entire time. You could write a book about your experience at these places. And of course, I'm not saying, trying to take the older people money away. But what I'm saying is, like, learn to let stuff go and learn to just, I don't know. I just hate seeing this, especially in that workplace. I kind of got triggered. I'm not going to lie. Because if we're supposed to be a family, a work family, y'all not doing family stuff. And that's what's just kind of like, I don't know.
Let me ask you this, Izzy. Were you raised by your parents, single parent, or grandparent?
Both, because my parents got a divorce, so I was joint custody.
Okay. You as millennials, and this may sound a little bit like I'm defending you guys, but you guys come from our generation, a Gen X, for the most part. Some of you come from boomers, but for the most part, Gen X. Most Gen X, the way we were raised, and the story that I shared about how I had to grow up so fast. And even if someone doesn't come from a background of a family that has emotional mental health issues or drug or alcohol addiction or abandonment issues, the fact of it is I can say to you that what I know of for a fact is either a single parent or grandparent was raising that child. You guys as millennials had to sort out either directly or indirectly through other family members, cousins, friends, what it meant to build relationships with people, to where my generation had to grow up fast and hard. Your generation had the repercussions of having to figure out, who am I? Because either you've got both parents that are working, you've got mainly grandparents raising you, or divorce situation, which is common. But then the question is where are you retaining that information? How are you absorbing your identification from an adult or a peer? That's a lot of stress, on top of being put into a world where you are told that if you don't wear a certain brand, have a certain pair of shoes, if you don't have the pressures of preparing for college by the time you're 10 or 12, and that you've got to struggle with not only sabotage type of style of personas, or what do they call that one? What is that, Izzy? It's almost like a oh my goodness, what is that? I have that brain fart sometimes. What is that perception of people where they have like an identity crisis, but they create like smoke and mirrors? It's
not narcissist. That's everybody's favorite word right now. Not that. I know what you're talking about. I can't think of the name of it, but it's like
imposter syndrome. That's it.
Oh yeah.
Your generation has a huge problem with imposter syndrome because of your environments.
And it's funny because I did an episode over that like maybe 2 seasons ago, and I kind of want to revisit that. But that's a real thing. It hasn't stopped me, But it definitely, at one point it did at the very beginning, like before the whole podcast thing. But I definitely can see. I know a lot of people personally at this age that's like really struggling with that, and it's just like, the fear of being, found out that you're wrong, or that you're an imposter, or that you're not who you say you are, and all that good stuff. And it's just like, a lot of, like you said, a lot of people have identity crisis at this age, around this time, because their parents want them to be one thing, then they want to be one thing. But in case like my case, like, they kind of got on the bandwagon now. But like, my parents are literally 30 years older than me. I'm 28. So we didn't grow up together. Like how some people, I got some friends whose mamas and daddies was 15, 16. They grew up together. They were well grown by the time they had me. And then I'm the only one. So it's like, and then I get that whole logic of, it's like, you can't really connect, because it's like you try, but it's just like just miss. It's just miss. And it's not anybody's fault. It's just how it is, unfortunately. But I love to see that this generation is kind of pushing back against that, and like, going against the grain in a lot of areas.
If to add to that, Izzy, I appreciate your generation and Gen Z. I do understand your point of view about you believing that millennials are entitled. My generation was entitled as well. I grew up entitled at your age, but I grew up entitled. My friends and all of us grew up entitled and angry because we felt abandoned and had to work through a lot of abandonment issues.
Right.
And then on top of, you already know my environment, there are people that had way worse, if not just as much as tumultuous environments, because they were taken from their families or had no connections with their families. I got an opportunity to be adopted and a second chance.
Right.
Most people don't get that. And I was able to be put with a family that wanted me and loved me. I come from a generation where it was extremely hard to place children out of foster care or to get kids adopted. I was in a position to where if it did not work out with my family who took me in, I would have been placed in a group child's home. So those were the pressures, and those were the triggers that fueled for whatever it was. I'm going to say this. Dyslexia for me was not a disability, Izzy. Dyslexia was a saving grace, because